Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
Reverend Wendy presents a talk that explores and expresses the truths of unity, and that there are real-world practical things that we can do to deepen our experience of spirituality and help us in our daily lives.
We're going to continue to build on this important idea of making connections. I think it is incredibly important for us to keep in mind that if we really want to be about making the world a better place, it really lands squarely in how do we treat one another? How do we connect with one another? And are we willing to look at how we might be able to do it a little bit better? It's never to say that we're not doing okay, but it is to say, how can I build upon what I'm already doing? How can I build upon what I already know to be more about cementing human connections with one another? So I want to share with you this morning 3 qualities that I think really help us to connect with each other in a deeper way, and then 3 behaviors that will help solidify that. You know, in some ways, we live in exciting times and challenging times. You and I have the opportunity to connect with each other, or to communicate with each other, I should say, in ways that generations before us never had. I mean, can you imagine for a moment thinking of your great-grandparents or your grandparents and what they would experience if they were plopped into life right here and right now with this idea of instant messaging and texting and Zooming and FaceTiming and Skyping and all of these ways that have become so much a part of our lives today that have really helped us to communicate better with each other. But in the midst of that, I'm a little bit concerned that we might be over-relying on communication and not really challenging ourselves to make sure that we are getting better and better at real, personal, heartfelt connections. I was doing a little bit of research again last night and trying to check in on some statistics about how we're doing as a human family. And some of the things that I came across with regard to where we are now in the topic of loneliness, because loneliness in many ways is the exact opposite of feeling connected, right? When we feel lonely, we feel disconnected from others. And one of the stats that I read said that the rate of loneliness has doubled in the last 50 years. That's concerning to me. That's concerning to me because I believe that people who feel connected with each other are much more likely to be people who work together to make the world a better place for all of us. That people who feel disconnected, people who feel alone and lonely, feel less inclined to care about and connect and make the world a better place. I came across something called the Cigna Loneliness Index. Anybody else heard of this? The Cigna Loneliness Index. And here's a stat that they reported. Regardless of race, gender, geography, or age, regardless of race, gender, geography, or age, today 1 in 5 people rarely feel close to another person. That's a pretty high stat, don't you think? 20% of the population rarely feels close to another person. Another stat they gave was 2 in 5 feel their relationships are not meaningful, aren't meaningful. They need to come to a unity community. Don't you think? We have this incredible program we launched last year, and many of you have taken advantage of it. And I hope you'll continue to take advantage of it. It's our life groups. We say life groups are dedicated to helping us do life together. I'm looking at a couple in our community that I know have dealt with significant loss in their life. And I know that part of what helped them move through that significant loss in their life was community, was doing life together. Doing life together. We also know physically that people who have meaningful connections, not just lots of Facebook friends, but meaningful connections, are healthier. Their bodies work better. Their lives work better. Doing life together helps us to do life better. Jesus was about this. When he called his disciples, he called them by twos. When he sent them out by twos into the world. I believe he did so because he knew what he was sending them to do might be, might be challenging. And they might need to lean on each other while they were doing the work that he gave them to do. Life is so much easier, and I dare say so much more enjoyable, when we have meaningful connections. So what are the 3 qualities that I think really help us to connect with one another in a meaningful way? The first one, I believe, is authenticity. If we are pretending to be something that we're really not, in order for someone or others to like us or approve of us, we may get that liking or that approving, but it's not going to register as real for us because the person is going to like a false version of ourselves. The only way we really feel a sense of connection and validation, if you will, from another, where it really matters or where it really feels real, is when we have the courage and the audacity to be our authentic selves, to really show up the way that we are. The way that we are, to be seen. It is a blessing that we are different. It is a blessing that we are each unique. And I know you've heard these words many times before, as have I. And it's easy when we've heard something before to just kind of let it go by and dismiss it. But the truth of the matter is there has never been a person exactly like you before. There isn't today a person exactly like you. And there won't be a person exactly like you tomorrow or at any other point in history. There's nobody that sees life exactly the way you do, that has the same joys and the same challenges, that laughs at the same things and cries at the same things, that has been hurt by the same things, that has seen the same things, that is gifted in the same way or challenged in the same way that you are. You really are, as am I, a one of a kind. Doesn't mean that there isn't plenty of room for us to continue to improve upon the uniqueness that we are, but we are special. One of the things that I appreciate very much about the unity teaching, besides our inclusivity, is that we absolutely believe that each and every one of us has a spark of God, the divine, within us. That each and every one of us was born right the first time. That we are born in original blessing, not in original sin. When we are our authentic selves, we give the world a gift. I came across this statement last night. Are you willing to give up being perfect for being authentic? Are you willing to give up being perfect for being authentic? What's the second quality? The second quality, I would say, is vulnerability. Say that with me. Vulnerability. Boy, you know, I do believe that we still live in a culture where it might be a little bit easier to be a woman and be vulnerable and be accepted for your vulnerability. I do think that it is still a little more difficult, maybe a lot more difficult, to be a man and be vulnerable and be accepted. There's a phrase that I come across. We're working to put together a men's group for Sangha nights starting in January. And in some of the research I've been doing around that, I came across a phrase that really touched me. It was the phrase, healthy masculinity. And to me, healthy masculinity would absolutely, positively include the quality of vulnerability. I think that regardless of gender, a person who is vulnerable is a person I can connect with. I know that when I've been in the presence of someone who's been their authentic selves and has been very vulnerable with whatever is going on in their life, I feel a connection with them, a realness with them. And I also know that in the times in my life that I have been most vulnerable, that I have felt the greatest amount of love coming toward me and actually acceptance coming toward me. Some of my deepest friendships and relationships have been birthed in the experience of extreme personal pain in which I was totally present and totally vulnerable. There's an openness and an opening that happens within us in vulnerability that allows, not only allows, but almost energetically invites the other to come forward. I came across this quote: "We don't connect at our strengths, we connect at our vulnerabilities." Think about that one for a moment. We don't really connect at our strengths, we connect at our vulnerabilities. Maya Angelou said something a little bit similar to that. She said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." No greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Think of somebody who's experienced sexual trauma, sexual abuse. When they keep that locked up inside and do not share that with at least one other person where it can be heard and believed in a sacred trust. I think that's what Maya Angelou is pointing to when she says there is an agony with that. Because as human beings, we have such a legitimate and genuine need to be understood, for our experiences to be validated, and to be accepted. So that then if there has been some great wound or injustice done to us, we have the strength to move forward and beyond that. So vulnerability is a really important aspect of helping us to meaningfully connect with another. And the third quality I would say is empathy. Empathy, say that with me. Empathy, empathy. Empathy is about being able to enter into another's experience, to so fully imagine yourself in the other's shoes, what it feels like to the other, what it sounds like to the other, what it looks like to the other. What a more soft and kind world we would live in if we really amped up our empathy for one another. Lincoln, I think it was, said something to the effect that I do not like that person. I must understand that person. I must come to know that person. I really believe that if we understood more of the history and the personal journey another has made, that has maybe caused them to be that sandpaper to our soul person, or may have caused that person to do some horrific things, if we really understood more of their story and their journey, we would be less inclined to ostracize them and more inclined to try to understand. Not to excuse behavior that needs to be changed, but to at least understand the person and the hurt behind the behavior that hurt another. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So it is in these qualities, the quality of us having the courage and the audacity to be our authentic selves while still growing to be a better version of our authentic selves, our vulnerability to let the other really see who and what we are, and especially if we're in a place of really hurting, to allow another in so that we can begin to heal that hurt. And empathy, to be willing to not judge the other, not throw the other out, but to really try to understand the other better by trying to put ourselves in their shoes. And I said that there were three qualities that I think, or three behaviors that can help. These are things to do. And one of them is being present and lingering longer. Say that with me. Being present and lingering longer. Being present and lingering longer. So when we're with another, And it's not just a casual, get your coffee at Starbucks kind of thing, but you're really with another. To really be with the other, to really be present with the other, and to linger a little longer. When Jesus was at a very painful and very difficult moment in his life, it was the experience that is called his Garden of Gethsemane experience. He knew what was going to happen on Good Friday. He knew he was going to be crucified. He took his disciples, 3 of his favorite disciples, with him to the garden, and he asked them to stay and keep watch and pray. He was asking them to be present with him, present in a moment of anguish and difficulty for him. He was asking them to linger longer. They didn't do a really good job, though. They fell asleep. But it doesn't change the fact that he recognized and actually asked for what it was that he needed. Be present, stay here, watch with me, linger longer. I've shared this story with you before, at least I think I have. I think I first heard it from Leo Buscaglia. It was about an older man who had been married for many, many years and had somewhat recently lost his wife. And he was sitting in his backyard and he was sobbing. And the houses were, I guess, pretty close together because in the other house there was a little boy of 5 or 6 years old who knew his neighbor and heard his neighbor crying. And so the little boy went over and spent some time with his neighbor. And the mother was aware that the little boy, her son, had gone over to spend time with the neighbor. And the mother was also aware that the crying seemed to stop. And when the little boy came back, the mother asked him, well, what did you do? What did you say to him? And the little boy said, oh, Mommy, I didn't say anything. I just crawled up in his lap and cried with him. That little boy is an amazing little boy. But somehow I think children somehow sense that maybe it isn't always about the words we say. Maybe it's really just about being fully present with another. Maybe it's about when the other is really hurting, that we deal with our own discomfort, if we have it, of seeing another crying. Because while we probably can't take the hurt and the sadness away, what we can do is help to soften it by simply being God with skin on, by simply, literally or figuratively, crawling up on that person's lap and letting them have the sadness and the tears that they have. Don't you think it would be a different world if we said these things are as important as any other thing you do in life? These things matter because they do matter. So being present and lingering a little longer. The second is listening deeply, and listening in a way that is not about trying to teach, that is not about trying to fix, that is not about trying to advise, that is not about trying to say, oh yeah, I've had that too, and let me tell you about my version of that. As soon as we listen in that way, the other is likely to feel very, very shut down. I told you a story some time ago about a young man that had put himself through college by selling himself out, if you will, to just be a listener, to just let people call him and talk about whatever was going on in their lives, that he would just listen. He wasn't a counselor. He wasn't going to offer advice. He would just, this is a while ago when college was more affordable, but still, he still made money doing this, which is to say that we have a need to be heard. How many of you have had a time in your life where really what you needed most was to be heard, not to be advised, but just to be heard? Raise your hand. That's pretty much every one of us in this room. In our attempt to try to help, and men do tend to be geared this way a little more than women, we tend to want to jump in and do what? Fix. There's a place for fixing, but fixing should come after really being present and listening. The kind of listening that I'm talking about is not just being quiet until the other person finishes talking. it's a kind of listening that is so active, your soul and spirit are engaged in receiving what the other is having to offer. If you have ever been on the receiving end of that kind of listening, you know what a gift it is. And what I believe is every single one of us in this room needs that kind of gift from time to time, but we also are capable of giving that kind of gift, of really being fully present and holding that sacred space of listening. We teach in Unity that there is an innate wisdom within each and every one of us. We teach in Unity that there is a teacher, a wisdom teacher, if you will, within us that already knows what we need to be doing, already knows what is our right next step, far more so than any external person could ever tell us. But a lot of times we don't get in touch with that if we're not given the opportunity to speak and to be heard in the cauldron of absolute sacred listening. And then the third practice, I would say, is paying attention, remembering, and then acting thoughtfully. Paying attention, remembering, and then acting thoughtfully. Say that with me. Paying attention, remembering, and acting thoughtfully. Some of you may have a friend or a family member who lost somebody this year in death. One of the most tender things you can do for that person is to reach out to them now during the holiday season. Because the first holiday that a person experiences after they have lost a loved one is one of the most painful and difficult experiences for them. I don't know what made me think of this, but years ago I started a practice that whenever I knew of somebody in our community who lost a loved one, I would calendar my planner for exactly 1 year from that date. And on the anniversary of that person's death, I would call that family member or text them and simply say, I'm remembering that today may be a really painful day for you because it was a year ago today that you lost your husband or your wife or your mother or your father. To be remembered. Very simple thing to do these kinds of things, to build them into our way of being, to pay attention, to remember, and to act thoughtfully. You have an opportunity, as I've said, if there's someone in your life who lost somebody this year, it doesn't always have to be on the anniversary of that loss, but if you were to reach out and say, I'm remembering, and I know that this might be a sad time for you right now, and I just want you to know I care. And to let go of having to have the perfect words, because a lot of times it's not about the words anyway. It's about your heart. I know it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said, what you are thunders so loudly, I can't hear what you say. What you are, in other words, the consciousness that you bring into your relationships thunders so loudly that the words you say are almost unimportant. So I want to bring us back to this idea of connecting with others. There are so many benefits that we experience in our willingness to get even better at connecting with each other. But I'm about, and I think you are too, not just doing these things spiritually to make my own life better. I'm glad that it does. But I'm about, and I think you are as well, realizing that as we do our life better, we helped to ripple that out to making this world a more loving, a more kind, and more peaceful world. So I hope you'll join me in that journey. Keep your eyes open, your heart open, and your mind open for the opportunities to deepen your connections with those around you. I promise there'll be one today that will surprise you. Namaste.
The Unity Center, spiritually progressive, socially responsive, radically inclusive. We have services on Sundays at 9 and 11. Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website, or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.